the edge of the sky, and your life is a story like the wind. Your life is a story like the wind.
So good afternoon and welcome everyone. Please bear with us. We're still waiting for a few more people to enter from the waiting room, and we'll be starting our discussion today in the next 2 minutes. So please just enjoy this rendition of Johnny Clegg, and we'll get started in the next few minutes.
I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart to hold and stand divine. I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart under African skies. I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart. I see the fire in your eyes. I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart that beats my name inside. Sometimes I feel that you really know me. Sometimes there's so much you could show me. I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart. Who comes in my side when you see him? I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart. Who comes in my side when you see him? I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart to hold and stand divine. I'm searching for the spirit of the great heart under African skies.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the South African Chamber of Commerce, thank you for joining us today. We are joined by Dominic Volek of Henley Partners, and today we're going to be discussing citizenship by investment, a how-to guide. So this is now the fourth installment of our how-to guide. And essentially what we have covered so far is that we've looked at, number one, how do you move money out of South Africa? Number two, if you're a South African living abroad, how do you cease your tax residency? Number three, life insurance in Singapore, a how-to guide. And now today we're going to be looking at how do you gain additional citizenship by way of investment for immigration. And so it's a really interesting topic because I get asked these questions all the time by clients and the people that I work with, asking me, I'm a South African national and I'm looking at how do I obtain a secondary passport. The reasons for doing so usually include access to the European Union, and then also access to the USA. So generally, how do we achieve that? And this is why Dom is here today. So Dominic has joined us today to discuss these further. So just how this is going to work, everyone, please feel free to drop Q&A questions in the box, and we're going to do a Q&A section at the end. So please feel free just to add in any thoughts or questions or comments as we're going along into the chat box. As and when appropriate, I'll then pose your questions to Dominic, and there will be a section right at the end where we'll discuss questions and answers. So today's session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the South African Chamber's YouTube channel after this is complete. So if you wanted to revisit this or learn again and again about the opportunities available to you, you can do so by visiting our YouTube channel, which is simply the South African Chamber of Commerce, Singapore. So without further ado, I would like to now introduce you to Dominic Volek. And Dominic, if I could ask you to turn on your camera, and there we go. Nice to see you.
Hello, everyone.
So everyone, I'm just going to give you a little bit of an overview of Dominic and who he is and why he's joined us today. Essentially, Dominic is a South African and he's a chartered accountant. He's a member of the group executive committee for Henley Partners, but he's also the group head of private clients for Henley Partners. So he specializes in helping people to find a way to getting a new citizenship. So Dom, if you wouldn't mind, could you give us a little bit of an overview of Henley Partners, and then we get into your presentation?
Yeah, thank you, Michael, and very nice to meet you all. A bit further sort of personal background is, as you can hear, I am a South African. Moved across to Singapore in 2014, and then recently made a further jump to Dubai. So I've been in Dubai for the last year and a half, but I am back in Singapore as of 7:30 this morning. So back and forth between Dubai and Singapore, and we've got 35 offices around the world, assisting clients with acquiring residence and citizenship by investment. So also travel a lot, and also understand the pain of a lot of my clients, because I still just have my green number and my South African passport. So still struggle with all the travels I do, you know, going through the pain of getting visas and all this type of thing. Of course, it's the joke in my family that this is what I do for a living, but I only still have my South African passport. And I recently applied for my US visa, and the first appointment I got was in February 2023. So that's quite a hassle as well. So obviously the travel freedom and the global mobility is, of course, a big driver for our business, and also for South Africans exploring acquiring a second citizenship. As I think you should know, we're allowed dual citizenship. There's a sort of more of a formality sort of applying in South Africa to allow that the government sort of allows you to have it, but as I said, it's more of a formality that we assist our clients with once they start their citizenship application process. So just very quickly, if you're not familiar with our firm, so we are the global leader in residence and citizenship by investment. We do two things in what's known as the investment migration industry. So one is assisting high net worth and of course ultra high net worth individuals to understand what all of the different options are. We offer over 30 different countries that have investment migration programs. So we're an advisory firm. Starts with an introduction. We go through the various programs that are available. Of course, we need to understand your sort of family profile and ultimately what your objectives are. Is it relocation? Is it education? Is it just a better travel document? And then from there, we will narrow down to one or two countries that probably make the most sense for you and your family. And then we've got quite a large global footprint, which you can see on the next slide. And so it's very much an end-to-end service. We help you to identify the necessary investment that you may need to acquire as part of the process. We help you to collect all the documentation, and obviously that can be quite an onerous part, but that's what we do for our clients. And then the other part of our business is government advisory. So we also strategically advise various governments around the world on how to actually design and implement these programs. We've been doing that all very successfully for over 25 years now. And as I said, big global footprint. Here in Singapore, we've got a team of about 25 people now, and throughout Southeast Asia and in all the major sort of financial centers, London, Zurich, Dubai, Singapore, Hong Kong, a couple of offices now in South Africa. We opened up in Nigeria. So we've got a good feel and a good grasp, having served thousands and thousands of clients over the years. We are pretty adept at what we do. So the theme, of course, that we're looking at now, and so we specialize in, and the main focus of tonight's discussion is investment migration. So we don't, as a business, we're not involved in skilled visas or just general expat relocating. We don't assist with sort of citizenship by descent, or if your father was born in the UK, We of course know service providers that can assist with all these other elements of potentially naturalizing as a citizen somewhere else. And so, you know, with the support of Michael, we're happy to have a chat. And if it's not something we can assist you with, we'll generally be able to introduce you to someone that can help you. And so the focus here is, as we said, citizenship and residence. I think most of you know the difference, but just to recap, so citizenship, of course, is a permanent state. Unless you become really persona non grata, no one can take it away from you. And crucially, for a lot of clients, is the fact that you, by becoming a citizen of a country, you can get the passport, and that allows you your international travel, which I think for anyone, you know, I think most of you are here in Singapore. For anyone that lives in Singapore and works in this region, you're generally traveling all the time. When I was here, I was averaging about 150 flights a year. So luckily, in South Africa, if you didn't know this, you can actually have more than one valid South African passport at a time. So I could send one to, you know, embassies to get visas, while I could travel on my other one.
So I do, sorry, Dom, but I do believe you can also, from Home Affairs, specially request what's called the Maxi Passport, where they give you an additional number of pages for the people who do travel frequently. I've met a few South Africans here who all have 2 Maxi passports, and then they fill them in the space of 2 or 3 years. So very common.
That's exactly what I think. At one stage, I had 4 valid Maxi passports. So there is a way around it, but of course, there's potentially an easier way, you know, if you have the financial capacity, just to acquire a better passport that gives you the travel freedom that you need. And then on the resident side, so here again, I'm sure a lot of you have heard or are familiar with something like the Portugal Golden Resident Permit and the various golden visas that are available in Europe. These are particularly interesting for a lot of our South African clients. And so their residents, the general principle of residence by investment is I invest into often real estate. It can sometimes be venture capital funds, sometimes there's a job creation route that you can follow, sometimes it's a donation, but the residence is usually subject to you maintaining the investment. Often there's some level of physical presence requirements. And in most cases, which is interesting for a lot of our clients, is that the residence by investment program gives you a pathway to eventually apply for citizenship down the line. And there, Portugal is the standout option, which I'll come to in a little while. And so the key thing here as well is this is not tax residence. So this is often misunderstood. You know, what we're talking about here is citizenship and all the sort of legal rights and protections that provides, and the passport. And residence, it's a permit or a visa that allows you to physically reside in the country. It doesn't give you tax residence. Tax residence is a very different concept, which you would need to speak to a tax expert. I can tell you some of the basics on why certain countries are attractive to clients from a tax perspective. But of course, as with anything, if you're really going to physically relocate and change your tax residence, then you would need to take a lot of good sort of pre-moving, pre-planning advice, not only on the tax side, but from, you know, guys like Michael as well on the insurance and all the other things that go with a move like that.
So again, what Dom has just highlighted for our South African nationals on the call is extremely important because of the way that our income tax is derived. So essentially, residence is broken into 2 pieces for South Africans, where you have physical presence and ordinarily resident, and understanding how that appeals and how it applies to you. If you are going to be making a move to a new country and attaining dual citizenship is something I encourage you to figure out. Seek good professional tax advice and make an informed decision. So couldn't agree more with you there, Dom.
Yeah, and it's really important. I mean, the majority of our clients, if we talk about South Africans, which is obviously the theme of the day, they don't want to physically move now, particularly if you're in Singapore. You know, it's a very attractive destination from a tax perspective, but most of the clients that we work with ultimately will not retire here. You know, it's an expensive place, and obviously the lifestyle is very different to what we were familiar with growing up in Southern Africa. And so there's certain programs that most of our clients go after don't require any sort of significant physical presence, but they start the process now while they still sort of have their careers in these financial centers, Hong Kong, Singapore, Dubai, with a view that in time they can then physically relocate, and by that time potentially also acquire citizenship at the same time. So that's sort of the typical profile of our clients. I said most of our clients are high net worth individuals, and of course right up to sort of billionaires, but the general benchmark in terms of who is applying for an investment migration program, I would say as a general idea, our clients wouldn't spend more than sort of 10-20% of their net worth on one of these programs. And so there's a lot of different options, which I'll go to in a minute, in terms of costs and processes and all these things. But this is what we would typically work through with you in a very structured advisory process in terms of, your financial capacity, who's applying. A lot of these programs, you always have a main applicant, and then the main applicants can include, for the headline investment amount typically, you can include your spouse, your minor children, adult children in most cases, subject to a certain upper age limit, usually around sort of 30, as long as they're financially dependent on the main applicant. In most cases, they need to be in full-time studies and single. Some programs you can include parents, you can include grandparents, and even siblings. So you can really get a whole family unit applying under one investment amount, depending on the country that they choose. And so this slide, just very quickly, relatively obvious, but why does someone look for an alternative residence through one of these programs? So quality of life is an obvious one. If you want to move to a better climate, a more secure environment, better access to healthcare and transport systems. The healthcare side, of course, has become a bit more of a bigger topic through the pandemic. So pandemic preparedness, how did this country react, and what happens if there's a fifth or a sixth wave or another pandemic in 10 years' time? And so this is the thinking that we see around there. Security, of course, a lot of countries are very volatile from a political, economic uncertainty perspective, and so having a plan B, or what we, sort of stereotypical insurance policy, is what a lot of clients regard having a backup citizenship or residence. Education is a big one. Out here in Asia, a lot of our clients want to educate their kids in the top schools in the UK or the US or Canada. Australia is also very popular. And often, if you have the financial capacity, it's better to do that through an investor visa than through a student visa, because when the child is going in on a student visa, in most cases, the time that they spend there is not counting towards eventually becoming a permanent resident or citizen. But if they go through an investor visa, then typically after 4 or 5 years of studies, they then already become a permanent resident, and maybe a year later qualify for citizenship. So again, certain things to think around. It's not all about just getting a better passport for travel purposes. If the kids want to go and study in the US, maybe the EB-5 makes the most sense. And so there's different ways that we can look at it in that regard. And then taxes does come into it. Again, misconception that what we do is all about taxes. It really is not. Because to really change your tax residence, you've got to physically relocate, and in most cases spend at least 6 months in another jurisdiction, no longer become tax residents in the jurisdiction you're based in. And so it's a lot more complicated, but of course, by getting residence or citizenship in another country, you have the ability, if it's more favorable from a tax perspective, to physically relocate, do the time, and then benefit from the tax scheme that's available in that country.
It's very interesting, and I do think that for a lot of people, they think that it is solely about taxes, but there are so many more factors to consider. If you do have children that are going to go and become university-age children in the future, and education is then subsidized because you have a residence in, say, the European Union or somewhere like that, that is quite appealing, because the cost of that, if you were to go to private education as an international student on a South African passport, is extremely pricey.
And then this slide focuses a little bit more on the citizenship piece. So visa waivers and mobility is still a big driver. So anyone that has a passport, that they need a visa everywhere they need to travel, it's always a consideration. And of course, a lot of our clients probably have a PA or someone that can do it for them. But like I said, if I was desperate to get to the US now, there's not much I can do other than waiting and having my PA personally log in every morning trying to find an earlier appointment for me. So if you're a high net worth individual, and I know I can donate $100,000 in the Caribbean and have a Antigua passport as an example for my whole family in 4 to 6 months, I never have to worry about Schengen visas, UK visas. That's something to think about. So that has always been historically a big driver for our industry, and continues to be, and even more so now that things start to open up and we can start to travel again. The Caribbean, which I'll come to in a while, is very popular in that regard. Total costs anywhere from sort of $150,000 to $300,000, depending on the size of the family. And we can do everything remotely. So obviously we have an office in most jurisdictions, and we also have teams on the ground in these countries. And so it doesn't even require you to physically go there in some cases. Independence and retirement, again, we've touched on it already, but here in Singapore, a lot of clients look at the Malaysia My Second Home, they look at Thailand Elite, options within Southeast Asia, or potentially a combination of spending some time back in South Africa, maybe some time in the Med, and then some time in Southeast Asia. So that's quite popular. We see a lot more clients now doing combinations of programs with us, so 2 or 3 things, so that they can, spend 3 months here, 3 months there, maybe 6 months there, and they're just a bit more flexible in that regard. It's ultimately about optionality. That's really what our clients are after. And then privacy and security is, maybe a bit more of the darker side on why clients come to us. We do have, of course, those. We see it now in Europe, with the conflict in Ukraine. All of a sudden, all the Europeans are understanding that it actually makes sense to have something available to me and my family outside of Europe. So now all the French want to get residents in Mauritius, and a lot of the Brits are looking at, Malaysia My Second Home to be in Penang or Thailand. And so lots of evolving motives. The industry is not just for those in emerging volatile markets. In fact, our biggest single market now for new clients is actually the US, where they realize they're allowed dual citizenship. It's a significant population of high net worth individuals. And so they're also looking to get something in Europe and something in the Caribbean, maybe something in South America. And all of this is possible by going through these, very transparent legal investment migration programs. And then the fourth one, as I mentioned, tax planning and expatriation. If you're American, we have a lot of American clients that have been based out here in Asia for a long time, and they have no intention of ever going back to the US, but they, of course, are still subject to the US tax net because they are a citizen. So the US is one of only 2 countries in the world that taxes you because you're a citizen, regardless of your tax residence. And so if you're a US citizen and you really have no intention of going back, or you don't have any sort of physical, assets or anything like that, then they look for an alternative citizenship, and then they actually expatriate themselves out of the US. Again, there is talk from time to time of a lot of, some other countries, Australia, Canada, looking at this. Is it impossible that South Africa would move to that model one day? I would say no, it's not impossible. They already try and widen the tax net as much as possible, as I think some of Michael, the other talks that you've already done talk to.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would also say that one of the most efficient departments of the South African government is the South African Revenue Service. So they will definitely be looking at the best ways and means they can learn from the US and then implement. So Dominic, you mentioned that the US is one of 2 countries that taxes you according to citizenship. Just for interest's sake, what is the second?
The other one is Eritrea in Africa, but they obviously don't have something like FATCA that they can actually monitor it or implement citizenship-based taxation.
That's interesting. So that's the country above Ethiopia, correct?
Yeah, correct.
Interesting. Okay.
And then I've touched on some of this again. What do we see? What are the trends we see? As I said, this is not just for people in emerging markets with volatile economies or political situations. And so now we have Canada and the US are significant markets. Individuals and their families there looking to get more options available. Brexit has opened up the UK for us significantly, because everyone who had retirement plans in Spain and Portugal and Greece probably had already invested into property or will still be looking to do it, suddenly lost that settlement rights that they had after Brexit, because they were no longer part of the European Union. So that's now, I think, in our top 10 in terms of nationalities that we serve. So very much a growing industry, both on the demand side, so individuals looking to partake into these programs, but also on the supply side. So there's more and more programs coming online, and we'll see a lot more coming because of COVID as well. Because of course, if these programs are designed and implemented properly, they also raise significant foreign direct investment for those countries. And so even in Africa, we'll see more and more coming online, looking to capitalize on investors and talent and successful people looking to develop portfolios, and they do that through investing into countries. It's almost like a form of sovereign equity that we call it. And then just the last, in terms of the objectives, before I sort of get into the details of some of the programs, is of course COVID. And so, as I said, the discussion around pandemic preparedness and how have ICU and public healthcare systems responded, and this is something else we talk about, even to the point where, like something like the vaccine rollout, it's clear that most of Europe rolled out the vaccine very efficiently, and if you're in an emerging market, but you already had citizenship in Europe, you could get on your plane and fly there, get vaccinated, and go home again. So even that benefit is not something we ever thought would be a benefit, 4 or 5 years ago. And so then this slide really is a snapshot of what's out there. So there's actually about 100 countries around the world that have some form of legislation or regulation in place that allows for investment migration. But there's only just over about 30 countries that actively, have and promote these programs, and that are attractive and that our clients participate in. So every time, as I said, on the supply side, every time we do this presentation, there's another country we need to add on here. A lot of our clients that have previously done something with us then come back and say, I'll give you an example. I had a significant family here in Singapore, an Indian family. They did Malta, they moved to the UK pre-Brexit, and now they look at everything happening in Europe and they think, well, what else should we have? So they've still got their permanent residence in Singapore. They did the Global Investor Program, but then he says, well, what about a golden visa in Dubai? And what have you got in South America? How does Panama work? And so to have a sort of geographical, diversified portfolio across different countries is what's attractive to a lot of families as well. And so this is a mix of both citizenship by investment and residence by investment programs. We only have probably another 15-20 minutes. I guess we need to do Q&A, so I won't be going through all of this, but if there's anything on here that I don't particularly touch on, I will focus on those that are more popular with our South African clients, both in South Africa and those expats that are living in Singapore and Dubai and Hong Kong. But anything I don't touch on, if you need details, obviously you'll be able to find me quite easily. So where does South Africa rank? So we release every quarter the Henley Passport Index. It ranks all of our passports according to the number of countries I have visa-free or visa-on-arrival access to. So this just goes to the heart of global mobility. So the South African passport currently ranks 56th, with visa-free access to 101 countries, which from a quantity side doesn't actually look that bad. But of course, it's the quality that most of our clients are interested into. So unfortunately, that 101 doesn't include, the whole of Europe. It doesn't include the UK. And so that's why, purely from a global mobility perspective, a lot of our clients look to acquire a second citizenship from South Africa. You can see the list there. Turkey as well is not great from a travel perspective. It's visa-free access to Japan, which is unique to certainly to South Africa. But Turkey is not an EU member. It's not part of the Schengen. And so from a purely travel perspective, Turkey is not that interesting, although we do actually have a lot of clients. Recently, we opened the office in Istanbul about a year ago, and we do have a lot of interest out of South Africa, but in most cases, those clients are actually physically moving there. So it's a quality of life, going to Bodrum, Istanbul, and looking to actually physically relocate to Turkey. Montenegro is visa-free access to the Schengen, which is great. You can see the Caribbean performs very well in terms of their visa-free access. So there you've got the 5 independent Commonwealth islands of St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Lucia, Grenada, Dominica. For the cricket fans, that's obviously the West Indies, and they're very good passports from a travel perspective. All visa-free access to Europe, to the UK as well. And then sort of really at the top of the list, you have those countries that are very good from a travel perspective, Malta and Austria, but they're also members of the European Union. And so what that means is not only are you getting the travel freedom, but you're getting the settlement freedom across all 27 EU member states. So that's the right to live, work, study, in most cases the kids for free, in all 27 EU member states. So, Germany, France, these places don't have, out and out investment migration programs, but of course I can become a citizen of Malta and then I can go and live in those countries because I'm an EU citizen effectively.
It's a great benefit. And also, am I correct, in most of the EU member states, they also have free or subsidized healthcare?
Yeah, correct. Exactly.
It's a good place to get old.
And so the interesting thing about Turkey actually is as a Turkish citizen, you also have free healthcare. And usually as part of these application processes, you have to do a medical, do an HIV test to prove that you're not going to just get the citizenship and come and become a burden on the healthcare system. In Malta, as an example, you actually have to have comprehensive global medical insurance. But in Turkey, they don't actually ask any questions. And so, if you have something that is quite serious, you could become a citizen of Turkey and go and get free healthcare if it was something to keep in mind. So lots of different motives for why clients, look at these things, not just about travel freedom. And so again, Michael, you said you'll provide all these slides as well, will be available. So I won't spend too much time on all the details, but as you can see in the Caribbean, the model is very similar. So from a processing time, this is the government processing time. We usually take about a month or 2 to get your documents ready together with you. South Africa is sometimes a little bit slower in terms of getting things like police clearance certificates and that, so it can take a little bit longer. But I would say on average, it takes 1 to 3 months to get the application ready, and then we submit it to the government. And so in the Caribbean, the government usually takes 3 to 4 months to do the processing. And once your citizenship is approved, then at that stage, you make the investment. And so the model in the Caribbean is you generally have 2 options, sometimes a third option. But the most popular ones are either to make a non-refundable contribution, so it's a sunk cost, it's a donation to a sovereign fund in that island, anywhere from $100,000 to $200,000, depending on the size of the family, or you can invest into real estate anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000. And you're basically investing into what is usually a sort of 5-star managed resort. And so relatively hassle-free, usually a big brand behind it like Range or Intercontinental. You buy a unit within the hotel, which goes into a rental pool, and usually as part of the sale and purchase agreement, you get a couple of days use every year. And then after, on average, 5 years, you're allowed to then sell that real estate. Honestly, for most of our clients, they still usually just go for the donation route. Some clients just have too much real estate or don't want real estate in the Caribbean. And so the more popular option over the last few years has been the donation route. But of course, if you are looking to actually spend time in the Caribbean, then you can actually do it through real estate and get a bit of a return on that and ultimately sell it after a few years. In terms of physical presence, as I said, as part of the process, nothing required in any of them. But in Antigua, once you have your citizenship and your passport, you are required to visit it for 5 days, just 5 days within the first 5 years. But of course, we encourage all of our clients to go there. It's a bit far from Singapore. I think it took me about 51 hours to get home the one time, because you typically go through the UK or France and island hop a bit. But it's worth a trip if you haven't been to the Caribbean. And then the only one here, because some clients are like me, if you're really trying to get a visa and it's taking forever. I remember after COVID, most of my Schengens and UKs had expired, and I was in Dubai at the time. And in July, August, everyone leaves Dubai because it's too hot. And so we wanted to go to Europe, and we had to apply for Schengen visas, but we started late and we could only get our appointments, 2 months later to even apply, and then we wait another month to get it. So from a timing perspective, some clients really want this as quick as possible. And in that regard, St. Kitts and Nevis, actually the government provides like an accelerated application process. So usually the due diligence fee for the main applicant is $7,500 US. If you pay 25, then the government will prioritize your application and you'll be processed in usually 45 to 60 days. And so maybe a comment on the numbers, the 200 and the 100 that you see here, that's the sort of headline program investment amount. There'll always be, obviously we have a professional fee to do what we do, and that will depend on the program and the size of the family, but it's all very transparent. It's a fixed fee that we charge. And then there is also sort of processing fees, application fees, passport fees, that as part of our process, once we've understood your profile and narrowed it down to a country that you would like to proceed with, then of course we provide a very detailed breakdown of all the costs and everything that's involved. So it's usually sort of that headline amount plus, I would say, another maybe 20 to 30%. And so one of the big ones that we often assist clients with in the Caribbean is Grenada. Processing time, we've discussed. It's a very good passport from a travel perspective. It's unique in that it also has visa-free access to China. So quite popular here in Southeast Asia as well for anyone that does a lot of business, and the hassle of getting visas for China is quite difficult. Not that anyone's going at the moment. But the other unique thing about Grenada, and particularly for our South African clients, is those that have a view to actually go to the US. So the US is very popular also in South Africa, and most people go through the EB5 program, which is now sitting at an $800,000 US investment at risk for 5 years in order to get a green card. The other investor visa that's available in the US is the E2 visa, but it's only available to E2 treaty member countries, and South Africa is not one of those countries. So what some of our clients in South Africa do is they first become a Grenada citizen through the program, so they get the benefits of the travel freedom and the second passport, and then as a Grenada citizen they can apply for the E2 visa into the US. And because it's a non-immigrant visa, you're not automatically under the tax net as long as you're not spending more than the allowed time in the US. So the green card has various tax implications, as does American citizenship. But the E2 visa, as long as you're careful with your physical presence, you're not automatically under the US tax net with that.
So just a question quickly on that, Dominic, is the E2 investor visa, is that in order to obtain that, are you required to invest money into the US, or is it to start a business?
So there's no minimum investment and there's no job creation requirement. So we go back to the EB5. You invest $800,000 into a regional center. The regional center builds something, Marriott hotel, condos, whatever it is, creates 10 jobs on your behalf, and therefore you get your green card. So the E2 doesn't have a minimum investment amount or a job creation requirement. Most clients actually look at some sort of like a franchise, like set up a Dunkin' Donuts or a barber shop or something like that. I would say on average the investment is still between $150,000 to $250,000, but it's into a business that I run and I control. And so the EB5 is a higher investment amount. It's a green card, which some people, that's exactly what they want. The E2 is arguably a little bit less risky because you are in control of that business. And I think I have heard of some people getting away with like a 50,000 investment, but it'll just depend on what you ultimately, what business you set up there.
I mean, that sounds like an attractive option for South Africans that will, so one, you get more travel, two, you get access to the US and potentially opening a company there, and you can escape the US tax net if you are careful with your physical presence.
Yeah, exactly. And then if we look at Europe, so again, we're still on direct to citizenship by investment. So here you have those that are in the European Union, Austria and Malta, and you can see because of not only the greater travel freedom, but because of those settlement rights across the EU, they come with a much more significant capital requirement. So Austria doesn't have a program as such, but they do have a clause in the citizenship law that says for someone that brings significant economic benefits to the country, to the republic, they can become a citizen. It's quite a complicated process. It takes us probably about 2 to 3 years, but you can see it's a significant investment that's required. In Malta for those, again, usually ultra high net worth individuals that are looking for the EU, Malta is sort of the clearest process. There's very specific investment requirements and a process and 4 very clear stages that we have to go through in terms of the application. Malta is effectively a sunk cost. So you have 2 options in Malta. Sorry, you have 2 options in Malta. You can either select a 12-month residency period or a 36-month residency period. And so if you go for the 36th month, then once your citizenship is approved, you have to make a non-refundable contribution of 600,000 euros. If you opt for the by exception, the 12-month, then that non-refundable contribution goes up to 750,000 euros. Plus, you need to have real estate on the island. You can either purchase for 700,000 euros, or what most of our clients do is lease an apartment for 5 years at a minimum 16,000 euros per annum. So the rent plus the non-refundable contribution plus the fees, you're looking at an entry level of around sort of 700,000-800,000 euros. The whole process takes about 1.5 years if you go through the exceptional 12-month residence period. That doesn't mean you're physically resident in Malta the whole time, but all adults would need to spend at least 3 weeks there.
Okay.
And so that's the EU ones, from a capital requirement quite high, or at least relatively. And then you have Montenegro, which is very interesting for our South African clients. I think I've got it on the next slide. So Montenegro requires 2 things. Is a non-refundable contribution of 200,000 euros. And then you have a choice. You can either invest into a real estate project in the north of the country where they're trying to develop very much aligned to sort of a ski resort mountainous area for 250,000 euros, or in the south or in the capital, which is already the very touristic area, for 450,000 euros. So total outlay anywhere from 450 to 650. It is a good passport from a travel perspective, as you can see. And the sort of real interesting thing about Montenegro is that it is an official candidate member to join the European Union. The last estimates is that would probably happen by around 2024, 2025, which is not so far away. Never a guarantee of that type of thing, of course, but a lot of clients perhaps either don't have the financial capacity for Malta or don't like the donation element of it, and they're more comfortable at sort of half the costs in Montenegro. They get a passport in, at the moment, probably 6 to 8 months. And hopefully in the next 3, 5, 7 years, it joins the European Union. And then you have all the benefits of Austria and Malta as well.
Sounds brilliant. And we're just getting a few questions from the audience here, Dom, and so we'll get to them in a bit. But one of the questions is, why is Portugal not on the list? And the reason for that, guys, is that this is citizenship by investment. Next, we're going to get to residence by investment, and Portugal will fall under that area. So just stick with us. We're about to get there.
Yeah, very, very common question, because it's often sold incorrectly as a citizenship program. So I'm aware of the time as well. So Turkey, just very quickly, it's currently 250,000 US dollars into real estate, but the government has announced it's going up to 400. They just haven't said when yet, or a $500,000 equivalent, but in lira fixed deposit on a bank account. Coming to that question, because it's by far the most popular program for our clients is Portugal. So here we're looking at the European residence by investment options. Again, pretty comparable when you look at sort of processing times, investment amounts. You can see real estate is often a very common component of it. And this gives you residence in that country. Everything you see on this slide, except for Cyprus, is within the Schengen zone. So just the resident card gives you free movement in the Schengen area. So you're getting that mobility without having to worry about a Schengen visa ever again. Cyprus is EU, but it's not Schengen. So the residence card in Cyprus gives you the ability to live in Cyprus, but you don't have the free movement in the Schengen. And so that's why the others are often a bit more popular. And then the key one, if you look at the very bottom row there, is they all offer a pathway to citizenship. But the reason why Portugal is so popular is that it's now proven that it's the most efficient and probably least onerous pathway to citizenship. And so the reason I say that is if you look at Cyprus, you would really have to go and live in Cyprus for 5 years. So you've got to go and probably spend 6 months a year there. And most of our clients don't want to do that, at least not yet. I mean, Cyprus is a great place if I'm going to go and retire. This might be very interesting because then I can get an EU citizenship after I've lived there for 5 years. And there's no language requirement, which is also unique. But of course, as I said, that resident card for the 5 years while I'm waiting doesn't give me any sort of travel benefits. Greece is very interesting from a cost perspective. So 250,000 euros into real estate. There's also a 400,000 term deposit option. So I haven't included all the options here. I've just included sort of the general minimum and most preferred options. In Greece, again, you would have to go and live there for 5 out of 7 years, and you would have to learn how to speak Greek, which I believe is quite difficult. Italy, 10 years. Malta is very interesting from a cost perspective, but it's, again, primarily a donation. But the citizenship piece is very... In theory, you can become a citizen after living there for 10 to 15 years, but practically it doesn't work because they have the citizenship direct option. And then you have Portugal. So the way I'll spend a bit more time on Portugal on the next slide. So in Portugal, the most popular option since the program started in 2012 has always been real estate. And so the headline investment amount is 500,000 euros into real estate. Then they said, if you invest into a property that's older than 30 years, that you have a refurbishment plan, it goes down to 350,000 euros. And if it's in a low population density area, then it's discounted by a further 20%. And so that's how you get to a minimum investment amount on the real estate of 280,000 euros. And there are projects available so what some of the developers do is they will find an old monastery or an orphanage that is older than 30 years. They will redevelop it and they'll, into sort of a 4 or 5-star hotel. And again, you're buying a unit within. So there are projects that qualify for all of these requirements. Most popular over the years has always been residential real estate in Lisbon and Porto, and that was at 500,000 euros because properties weren't older than 30 years, and it's a high population density area. But the change that came in on the 1st of January this year was that they no longer allow the residential real estate in those high population density centers. And so you can still buy 500,000 of commercial property. Otherwise, you've got to go into the inland for the real estate option. And because of some of these changes, what became very popular over the last 3 or 4 years is the venture capital funds. Those were at 350,000 euros, and that increased to 500 on the 1st of Jan. So there was a mad rush of applications into Portugal trying to beat these changes by the end of last year. But honestly, now that they've come in, we haven't really seen the demand drop off, much at all. People have just accepted the higher investment amounts or the more limited real estate locations and continue to invest. And then what makes it so interesting is, other than the Schengen access, is when you get the resident card, you have it, the golden visa program runs for 5 years, and you effectively have to spend only 7 days a year in each of those 5 years. And then after 5 years, you have 3 options. Either you just keep rolling the golden visa for 2 years at a time, spend 14 days and maintain your investment, or you can apply for permanent residence, or what everyone generally, particularly South Africans, are after, is you can apply for citizenship. So there is a sort of an elementary level Portuguese language requirement. You have to have legally resided in Portugal for 5 years, and it's now been proven that there's actual cases now where clients had the golden visa, and that means they were legally resident, even though they spent the bare minimum 7 days a year. But you also have to establish other sort of genuine links to Portugal. And so this is what you will do, throughout the 5 years. You would naturally have a bank account. You would probably join a golf club. All of these things will count to your citizenship application at the end of year 5. But the actual process of, submitting the citizenship application, the government processing and approving it, that can still take like a year and a half. So realistically, if you start Portugal today, you're probably going to look at 8 years before you have that Portuguese citizenship, because the application process at the moment is slower than normal because of the demand. Then you've got 5 years, and then probably another year and a half to 2 years waiting for the passport. So if you have the financial capacity, you go to Malta. That takes about a year and a half. But Portugal is a great option if you're not in any rush, or you just, you prefer to invest your money into real estate. So it's a residence program that gives you a path to citizenship, subject to separate eligibility criteria down the line.
So that's very interesting. And to everyone on the call, thank you for your questions coming through. Obviously, today's how-to guide was essentially just focusing on the Caribbean and Europe. But within the resource that Dominic has put together for all of you today, there are further sections on Asia, on Hong Kong, on Singapore, Australia, etc. So we'll get to those perhaps in another how-to guide as we've run out of time here today. But just on Portugal, Dominic, this is something that I've heard, and if you could clarify, it would be interesting. Is it also true that for all of your income that's generated offshore outside of Portugal, that is not taxed if you have this visa and you're residing in Portugal?
Yeah, so the key part is if you're actually residing there. So if you actually physically go and become a tax resident in Portugal, and a lot of these countries have these interesting tax schemes available. So in Portugal, it's called the non-habitual resident. So you would be a non-habitual resident. It's only available to you for your first 10 years. And you pay a flat 20% tax on local sourced income, which probably you wouldn't have a lot of. And then a lot of your passive worldwide income is not taxed in Portugal. So most of Europe is worldwide taxation. If you're a tax resident in a country, you'll pay tax on worldwide income. But Portugal has this non-habitual resident that certainly makes it attractive, at least for the first 10 years that you would go and become a tax resident there. If you look at some of the other countries, Cyprus has a sort of a non-dom rule like the UK. Greece and Italy have a lump sum taxation that's available, which is similar to Switzerland. Malta taxes on worldwide income only on a remittance basis. So along the, next to the investment migration program, a lot of them do have can be very interesting from a tax perspective. But as we said, I can tell you some highlights, but I won't give you advice on that.
Sure, absolutely. And guys, why that is interesting and why I bring it up is if you are looking for the place that you are going to go off and retire in or spend your retirement years, you could look at utilizing a structure or an opportunity like this where you could have investment structured offshore to provide you with a passive income into the jurisdiction where you'll be residing, for example, Portugal, and there could be tax benefits for doing so where you may not pay local taxes in the country you're living in. So again, these are reasons to consult professionals on these areas like Dominic. And for myself, this is sort of the work I do with clients, is also helping them to understand, yes, if you do want to retire in Portugal, for example, what are the ways that you can mitigate taxes? What are the ways that you can source an income? What are the currencies you can receive, etc. if you're living in Singapore? And how do you structure that sort of thing so you can go off and have this ideal retirement that you're looking at So that's extremely interesting. And Dom, thank you very much for your in-depth presentation here. I know you have basically taken something that is full of information and compressed it down to the bare minimum of an hour for us here today. So I'm very grateful for that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, no problem. As I said, I was never going to get through this in an hour, but if anyone does have any questions on anything, please do get hold of me. We've got a whole team here, and wherever you are, I think most of you are in Singapore, but if I'm not around, then certainly the team can, catch up with you and have a meeting. We don't charge for consultations or anything like that, so happy to support you, take you through some options, answer any questions you have. And if there's something interesting, we'd love to assist you. And if not, that's okay as well.
So Dominic's details are obviously on the screen right now, but if you ever watch Bloomberg or the BBC, you would also sometimes see Dominic being interviewed. So if you see him next time, now you know who he is and why they're asking him to speak. As you can see, he's an expert on this area, and it is a very ever-changing landscape. There's countries being admitted to the EU, there's countries changing the investment amount, and again, this is a reason why you should be looking at seeking professional advice in this area. So if you do have questions on anything we've mentioned here, please do feel free to send them into the chat box now. I am getting a few messages just saying thank you very much, and also someone has asked, please do share the slides of today's presentation, which we will be doing. And Dominic, if I can take over from you on the screen share. Everyone, please, if you could also just hop onto the South African Chamber's website, and this would enable you to download the resource of today, as well as the resources from our other how-to guides. So I'll just quickly show you. I'll show you where you can find the information and the presentation from today on our website. And here we go. So if you come onto the South African Chamber website, so it's sacham.sg, and then you come onto our page here, which is resources, you'll see first our YouTube channel, which has got all of our presentations that we do on a very frequent basis, that is specifically to the South African audience living here in Singapore and across Asia, on numerous topics. But if you come on here, you'll see the first 4 documents are actually our how-to guides from the series so far. The first one was moving money out of South Africa. So this is a flow chart that explains how you do that. The second is ceasing South African tax residence and the process behind that and the reasons to do that. That is quite a lengthy document. It took me about 3 months to write that with a tax practitioner down in Cape Town. And then life insurance, a how-to guide for South Africans in Singapore. This is what we focused on last week. It's a very interesting summary. And finally, today's resource that we've just discussed with Dominic is available right here. So please do visit our website. Do look at our South African how-to guides that are available, all for free. And the reason that we've put these together is obviously to contribute value to the community and to bring knowledge to the areas that everyone is interested in, but perhaps they didn't know where to find the information. So yeah, please do visit the website. So in terms of upcoming events, so obviously we are here today where we are discussing citizenship by investment. But next week, we're going to be talking about opportunities, challenges, and the macro outlook for South Africa with ABSA Corporate Investment Bank. So for those of you who have not heard of ABSA, ABSA is the Corporate Investment Bank of South Africa. It's one of the top 4 banks in South Africa, and they're a member of the Chamber. So I believe it is their head of economic research is going to be discussing the macro outlook for South Africa. So please do please do join that conversation to hear from ABSA as well. In terms of how you can find us, it's as simple as sacham.sg, or you can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, the South African Chamber of Commerce. Please do join along for future talks. We have these events, as I say, regularly. and we get to get the best of the best in the businesses, such as, for example, today, Dominic coming to talk to us about his field on a frequent basis. So I've just had someone send some questions. Just hold on, everyone. And Dominic, if you're okay for another 5 minutes, just to answer some questions.
Yeah, no problem.
All right. So, all right. So the first one is on the European Union and on the programs for both investment for citizenship as well as residence. Is there any risk that perhaps the countries may decide to stop these in the near future at all?
Yeah, there is. So, there's a certain part of the European Commission that doesn't like them. It is quite a sensitive topic, and, becoming an EU citizen without genuine links is something that they often refer to. So there is a motion at the moment to ultimately phase out the citizenship in Europe. Malta is the only one that really, has this sort of process in place at the moment, and the European Commission has been told in no uncertain terms that they have no legal basis to govern what a member state does with their citizenship. And so Malta has remained quite firm on that. They had the first program, which had a quota of 1,800 families, which they hit the quota. This pressure's been there for years, and they went on and started the current process after that with a quota of 1,500. So Malta's been very clear on the fact that, as I said, the European Commission doesn't have any legal status to govern what they do with their citizenship. But that said, of course, pressure can be applied in different ways. And so we always say to our clients, act while you can, because Malta won't always be there. Maybe they do close the program eventually. I don't think they will close it prematurely, but I think when they hit the quota, who knows what will happen. On the resident side, there is talk as well of just regulating the programs a lot more. So it's a problem with the industry, to be honest with you, that it's not a regulated industry. And so I was on a talk earlier, just before this one, on a wealth management forum, and there I referred to the industry, unfortunately, having lots of cowboys. And so, we're actually very pro-regulation. It would certainly clean up certain elements. And so if that comes, for us, it wouldn't really be a big deal. But the message on clients is quite clear. As I said, act while you can. Once you're in the program, you're not going to get kicked out. So if you're now sitting in year 2 or year 3 in Portugal, they're not going to shut the program and you get kicked out and you're stuck with a house in Portugal. What they would do and what they do when they close these things is they stop taking new applications. And so that of course is a risk. But once you're in sort of the system, you will be processed and come out on the other end. There's sort of little to no risk of that happening. But as I said, there is pressure on them. And so as much pressure as there is, a lot of them, the industry is also almost too big now because these countries are also very reliant on them. Portugal, I think, has now raised, 7 or 8 billion euros, since 2012, just through their Golden Residence program. Malta, in the first program, raised about 2 billion. Their whole GDP per year is only 8. So they are significant sources of foreign direct investment for these countries as well. And so the countries have every interest to make sure the due diligence is done correctly, that only, clean, successful, the right skills and talent are acquiring residence and citizenship in them.
I mean, that's a really good point. And also the fact that they wouldn't do it retrospective where you're in and they kick you out.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
That's a relief. All right, so just one
sorry,
more.
So Montenegro is the classic example. Montenegro was launched in 2018, and they were only ever going to take, I think it was 1,200 or keep it open for 3 years. And so they never got close to the 1,200 because of COVID, because you had to travel there as part of the process. And so the program was actually due to close at the end of last year. But then on the 31st of December, I think we submitted a whole lot of applications in the last sort of minute, and then they extended it for one more year. So Montenegro is an example. If you don't start as soon as possible and get everything together and submit it by the end of December, you'll miss that opportunity as well.
And so the last question that we can tackle here today, and I'll let you go off to your next meeting, is that are there any cases where the South African government has not approved dual citizenship for people?
Not that I'm aware of at all. I mean, all of our clients, it's all been relatively straightforward. The idea is you're supposed to apply for it up front. So even if you don't have the approval yet, you need to send in the letter, and we assist with the drafting of the letter and all of this to apply for it. And then, as I said, it's pretty much a formality. You generally just get approved. I have actually had 1 or 2 clients that didn't do it or forgot to do it, or eventually and had been, approved already, and they just sort of retrospectively applied and they got it as well, no problem. But I mean, I'm aware of a lot of, my wife, for an example, has got a UK citizenship through her father. She got it while we were living here, and she just never bothered to do anything in South Africa. So, I mean, it depends on the individual, but obviously I would certainly advise that you just go through the process. There's a company, there's a provider that we work with that does it for you, pay them a couple of rand, and the process is pretty straightforward and efficient.
Very good. And on that note, Dominic, thanks so much again for your time, and to our audience, thank you very much for joining us today and for your questions. I appreciate everyone's support on this How-To Guide series. It's been a lot of work for the Chamber for us to come up with 4 topics and get the resources and the expertise to come and talk to the audience. So I do appreciate everyone's time and their support. Again, look for Dominic on social media as well. If you can find Dominic on LinkedIn, he posts frequently, as you were saying, the quarterly report on citizenship and passport strengths, etc. It's actually interesting to read. Connect with him and you can learn more. So again, thanks everyone and have a good evening.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks everyone for your time.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Cheers, guys.